ओके शुक्र है ना. It's on. Hi, good afternoon to everyone. It's fine, clear. So, shall we start? So, in the session today, am I audible? In the session today, we'll discuss about the agrarian unrest in post-independent era. It is also termed as farmers' protest movement in India after its independence. Clear? Now, just understand the structure, how we are going to discuss about the farmers' protest or agrarian unrest in post-independent era. Clear? First of all, we'll discuss about farmers' protest movement just after India's independence, that is after 1947. Clear? Second major phase of farmers' movement was in the decade of 1960s. It was in form of Naxal movement in India. Clear? And third was in form of new farmers movement that started in the decade of 1980s, that continued till contemporary time. The recent farmers protest is a legacy of new farmers movement that was led by Bharatiya Kisan Union, headed by Rakesh Tikat. Clear? So we'll discuss till contemporary times. Clear? First of all, the changing nature of peasant agitation after India's independence. First of all, I'll let you know. Clear? As soon as India became an independent nation, the first major peasant agitation took place in the southern part of India, which is known as the Telangana peasant movement. Clear? It started even in pre-independent era, became very vocal after India's independence. Clear? Telangana peasant movement was largely influenced by communist ideology that became all popular all across the world after Russian Revolution. Clear? Influenced by communist philosophy that believes in establishment of perfect equality. Large number of communist and peasant leaders in Telangana, they demanded back the lands which were taken by the landholders class, or rather the middlemen in Telangana. Clear? This ideology promoted a classless society whereby equality was to be established for everyone. Clear? When India became an independent nation, as we had discussed earlier, Hyderabad was only a princely state, very powerful one, but was not ready to integrate with India. And in order to maintain its independence, Nizam of Hyderabad maintained its own aristocratic military force known as the Razakars. We had discussed about all these developments. Clear? These Razakars were even used to suppress the communist leaders in Telangana who were demanding radical land reforms from the Nizam of Hyderabad. So initially, the peasant movements in Hyderabad was not against the state of India. It was primarily against the Nizam of Hyderabad. Clear? And therefore, Nizam of Hyderabad in villages, they deputed Razakars against the peasantry class in Telangana region. Clear? Therefore, the peasantry class first of all demanded their rights, and they also supported Indian government's initiative to integrate Hyderabad with Indian Union. So in this way, the peasant movement in Telangana both had agrarian nature as well as political nature. And marked by both agrarian and political nature, all these peasants and communist leaders of Telangana, they supported Indian government's move to integrate Telangana into, or Hyderabad into, Indian Union. As we had discussed, in 1948, Hyderabad was incorporated into Indian Union through instrument of accession signed by Nizam of Hyderabad. In this way, this became an integral part of Indian Union. But at the same time, clear, those peasants and communist leaders who were protesting against Nizam and Razakars, they immediately demanded land reforms from Indian government. Initially, Indian government could not promote land reforms, and that is why the movement which was against Nizam and movement which was against Razakars. This movement also started against Indian government. Clear? Since it started against Indian government, clear, they committed a mistake of comparing the forces of Razakars with the forces of government of India. Clear? Razakars were marked by medieval system and medieval armaments, but Indian government by this time had acquired modern sophisticated forces and large armed forces. Indian government deputed large armed forces that led to brutal suppression of the peasants and communist leaders in the region of Telangana. But at the same time, by suppressing the peasantry class, Indian government also went for radical agrarian reforms in Telangana. Clear? First major agrarian reform was Tenancy Reforms passed in Hyderabad in order to distribute lands in the region of Nalgonda, Khammam and other prominent districts in favor of the peasantry class. In 1950, they also enacted abolition of intermediaries from the landholding class. This also resulted into large-scale proper distribution of lands in favor of the landless classes in Telangana. In this way, even though brutal suppression of communist leaders took place, but land distribution was promoted by government of India effectively, and peasant agitation of Telangana was the first success agriculture agitation in post-independent era. This became the first major development after India's independence. But thereafter, other major peasant agitation could not be continued because land reforms in India failed miserably. We had discussed the reasons also: Bhudan movement, the Gramdan movement, and even the land reforms of government of India failed because of elitist character of Indian bureaucracy. When large amount of land reforms failed, finally in the decade of 1960s, influenced by Maoist philosophy, a very important movement was started in Naxalbari area of Darjeeling district in West Bengal. This resulted into a class struggle in India in form of arms struggle known as Naxal movement in India, largely promoted by two prominent thinkers in Bengal. These two prominent thinkers were Charu Majumdar and Kanu Sanyal. This marked the beginning of Maoist philosophy in India to grab land. The term was grab because they believed in forceful acquisition of land, and state had failed miserably to ensure proper redistribution of lands in India. Now we'll discuss what was this philosophy behind Naxalbari movement that resulted to Naxal movement, which is considered to be the biggest threat to India's internal security even now. Clear? Now what do we mean by Maoist philosophy? This was the real peasant agrarian unrest that took place in post-independent era. What do you mean by this approach of Maoism? How it is different from Leninism? Clear? What was this philosophy that led to Naxal agitation in India? Any idea? Any of you knowing about Maoist philosophy given by Mao Zedong in China?
The power comes from the barrel of the gun.
The power comes from the barrel of the gun. Maoist, again I'll let you know, clear? Mao Zedong, also known as Mao Zedong, clear? He was a very prominent ruler in China, and he believed that land cannot be distributed peacefully in favor of the peasantry class. He believed that land has to be snatched away from the landlords, the state machinery, and land has to be defended by power and force. So he believed in force to be done or to be executed to establish control over land. Based on this radical ideology, Maoist philosophy influenced Naxal movement in India, promoted by Charu Majumdar and Kanu Sanyal. In this way, in this philosophy, it resulted into prominent land reform movement starting from northern states of India till it went up to Andhra Pradesh. Clear? And in course of time, even the Telangana peasant movement supported the Naxal movement, and this resulted into an area known as Red Corridor that existed in India based on Maoist philosophy. Clear? This was second movement. Clear? And the third major phase of peasant movement was started from decades of 1980. And it was started first of all by a UN official in India, Sharad Joshi in Maharashtra, when he started Shetkari Sangathan to demand reduction in electricity bill and other issues related to peasantry class. And after this person, Sharad Joshi, a very important and new form of peasant agitation marked by indefinite dharnas, marked by stopping of basic amenities to urban dwellers, was started in Sisoli village of Muzaffarnagar. And this agitation was led by Mahendra Singh Tikat, who founded Bharatiya Kisan Union. Clear? This became a part of new farmers movement. So three different phases. The first major being the Telangana peasant movement, which was peaceful in nature. Then we have radical movement in form of Naxal agitation, and then the new farmers movement marked by agitation against the state and urban dwellers marked by indefinite strike and dharnas. Clear? This agitation that was led by Rakesh Tikat recently, the son of Mahendra Singh Tikat, clear? It ended because the same mistake that he did was performed by his father also. And the reason was, rather than advocating the grievances of the peasantry class, clear, they began to pit themselves against urban dwellers in India. They decided to stop the basic supplies to urban areas. They decided to take action against the urban dwellers in India, and that is why large chunk of people did not support this peasant agitation. And therefore, like the movement of Mahendra Singh Tikat, even the movement of Rakesh Tikat could not survive for long. Clear? These are different phases and different movements of agrarian unrest in post-independent era. We'll write about them, the movement that started after India's independence. Right, heading as peasant unrest. Peasant unrest after India's independence. Peasant unrest after India's independence. Yeah. Right, the most important concern in post-independent era, was highlighted by the peasantry class, related to land redistribution, Yeah. Right. In the first phase of peasants' unrest, the demand was related to land reforms only. Second phase, it was class level. It was related to land reforms. Right. Since government could not implement land reforms effectively, the communist leaders started protest in the region of Telangana, Okay? Right, popularly known as Telangana peasant movement, It was originally directed against the Nizam of Hyderabad against Nizam of Hyderabad and his military force Razakars, and his military force, Razakars. We had talked about them when we'll discuss the integration of Hyderabad, Razakars, clear? Right, the communist and the peasants, the communist and the peasants, in rural areas, began to attack Razakars, that led to the weakening of aristocratic force. It was made by Muslim aristocratic force. Like this facilitated the government of India. To defeat Razakars, and to integrate Hyderabad. Change paragraph, right? However, the peasants and communists of Telangana, began to protest against government of India, as it failed to introduce land reforms. Clear? Right? Even though peasants were suppressed by superior military force, Here, Indian government enacted Hyderabad Tenancy Act, and abolition of Intermediaries Act, in 1960. Clear? Intermediaries Act, Landed Intermediaries Act, 1960. Right? In this way, land reforms took desired shape. Land reforms took desired shape in Telangana. Which was the first successful experiment in independent India on agrarian front. So first phase marked by Telangana related to land reform. In second phase, it was related to snatching of lands, more radical in nature, marked by class struggle. Clear? Change paragraph. Clear? Right. The second phase of peasant unrest. Was marked by clear-cut ideology of class struggle ideology of class struggle. This originally given by Karl Marx in Scientific Socialism. Clear? Class struggle, class of haves and class of have-nots. Haves being termed as the bourgeoisie class, have-nots being termed as proletariat class. Clear? Conflict between bourgeoisie and proletariat. In Karl Marx advocate, if it is not done peacefully, it has to be done through revolutionary violence. Clear? So this was totally based on that philosophy of class struggle. Right. Exactly after 2 decades.
What was the name of the revolution you gave? Socialist? Marx revolution, you just named it.
Scientific socialism. The term is scientific socialism. Yeah, pardon me? Pardon?
It was also termed by the Stalin.
Stalin. See, I'll let you know. Just understand. Ideologically, you need to be very clear. Clear? We'll come to Stalin also. First of all, I'll let you know. Clear? First of all, the logic is, then we'll come to Stalin. Stalin was a dictator. Scientific socialism. Why do we use the word scientific with socialism here? Socialism is very old. Clear? Socialism came into picture as a consequence of industrial revolution. Clear? When condition of workers became pathetic with industrialization in Britain and other countries of Europe. Clear? Therefore, those socialist leaders, they were capitalist only. They advocated that even the interest of workers needs to be protected. They are working under unhygienic conditions for unregulated hours. So ultimately, if their interest is not protected, industrial growth cannot be continued. And therefore, they began to advocate proper treatment and resource distribution in favor of the working class. Clear? But they requested this to be done. They never gave any forceful method to be done. That is why those socialists are considered to be first generation socialists, and they are also considered to be utopian socialists. That is, they were only ideal in nature. Their philosophy could not be implemented. Then socialism was given a scientific base by Karl Marx when he published or when he wrote a work known as Communist Manifesto. It was written in 1848, and in this Communist Manifesto, Karl Marx has given historical interpretation also. Clear? And this interpretation of history is nothing but a class struggle between haves and have-nots. Clear? He has also explained how these two classes of haves and have-nots come into being. Clear? And there's a mathematical formula given, which is scientific in nature. That is why we use the word scientific. The scientific formula is, according to Karl Marx, it is believed that there are large number of workers who work only for wages. Clear? But these wages are not in proportion to the productivity of those workers, meaning thereby the output generated by workers is much more than the wages paid to them. Clear? So they survive only on wages, but they contribute largely in output. So this difference between wages paid to them and output generated by them, this difference is known by Karl Marx, or termed by Karl Marx as surplus value. Clear? And this surplus value goes into the pocket of the capitalist class. So in course of time, capitalist class becomes rich and richer, and the working class remains at the same level of subsistence. Clear? This results into class of haves and have-nots. Haves being termed as bourgeoisie class, the middle class, and proletariat being the working class. This concept is clear. This one thing, this ideology was given, but it did not become popular. Make it clear. Initially, it was not popular. It was only in books. It was made popular by one of the friend and philosopher of Karl Marx, Friedrich Engels. Clear? He published all the works of Karl Marx, not only Communist Manifesto, Das Kapital, that he wrote in 1867. Clear? All these works became popular in the beginning of 20th century, and based on this philosophy of socialism and communism, very important revolution took place in Europe known as Russian Revolution. And Russian Revolution took place just because of this concept of promoting the interest of workers. Workers were the base of Russian Revolution. And when this revolution became successful, known as Bolshevik Revolution, Lenin began to pursue war communism. Clear? War communism, that is communism on war footing. Clear? Russian economy began to develop also rapidly. But in 1924, Lenin died. And after some political confusion, Stalin came as dictator. Clear? Stalin began to follow a dictatorship approach. He wanted complete command economy to be followed. Clear? And since he wanted to have command economy from 1927, he went for 5-year plans in Soviet economy. Clear? But more importantly, this command economy worked at this time. The reason was capitalism came under scrutiny from 1929. The reason was because of great economic depression. Clear? And since this great economic depression affected all the capitalist countries, Soviet economy began to develop. And therefore, this ideology to some extent is known as Stalinism also. Clear? It was nothing new. He was following the ideology that was already started by Lenin. So Lenin is known as Leninism. Clear? And the basis of Leninism is emphasis on urban economy and at the same time on working class. Clear? This is the difference between Leninism and Maoism. Clear? Maoism believes in focus on rural economy and peasantry class. Clear? And Leninism believes in urban economy and working class. That is why in 1980, when Sharad Joshi, a UN official, came to India, started peasant agitation, he said, this is a fight between India and Bharat. Clear? That is, India representing the urban economy and the working class, and Bharat representing rural economy and agriculture class. Clear? This was given a different shape by Sharad Joshi, who started Shetkari Sangathan in Maharashtra. And same philosophy to a large extent was carried by Mahinder Singh Tikat in Sisoli village of Muzaffarnagar also. Clear? All these had huge legacy. So they are guided by ideologies. Ideologies are important. Naxal movement became one major ideological movement to promote peasant unrest. Scientific socialism. Stalinism is a concept that is carried forward according to Leninism. Leninism being focused on urban economy, working class. Maoism, rural economy, agriculture class. India and Bharat was based on this concept. It's clear, right, about class struggle. Clear? Right? Exactly after 2 decades of India's independence, 2 decades of India's independence, philosophy of class struggle marked the peasant unrest in India. That this philosophy was promoted in the village of Naxalbari. Darjeeling district of West Bengal, in the village of Naxalbari, by 2 thinkers, Charu Majumdar and Kanu Sanyal. Clear? Right. These thinkers strongly advocated that peasant unrest must be accompanied by force, influenced by Maoist philosophy. Right. According to this approach, land is to be taken back forcefully. And defended with arms and weapons. Clear? Right. This marked the beginning of, marked the beginning of violent agitation against the state, violent agitation against the state, to be termed as the Naxal movement, to be termed as the Naxal movement. Clear? Right. In course of time, it became widespread. It became widespread from Nepal to Andhra. We also use the term from Tirupati to Pashupati. Clear? From Nepal to Andhra, being termed as the Red Corridors, being termed as the Red Corridor. Red indicate communism, Maoism, termed as Red Corridor. So first phase resulted into land reform. Second phase resulted into class struggle that continues till contemporary times. Clear? Right. The third phase of peasant unrest marked by class struggle. Time from 1960s, 60s to 80s. It's 47 to 60, the first phase, 60 to 80, and then 80 to current times. Clear? Third phase. Like the third phase of peasant unrest, the third phase of peasant unrest began from 1980, with distinct approach of hostility towards hostility towards urban dwellers. This is another approach. Hostility towards urban dwellers. So first against the government of Razakars and the state. Then second, class struggle against all the landed classes including state. And third, against urban dwellers. Different phases are there. Clear? Right. Such agitation is termed as New Farmers Movement in India. New Farmers, right? New with inverted comma. New Farmers Movement in India. That this movement was first started. This movement was first started by Sharad Joshi. Started by Sharad Joshi, who established Shetkari Sangathan, in Maharashtra. Shetkari Sangathan in Maharashtra. Clear? Right. This movement aimed at pressure strategy by stopping the supply of essential commodities, from rural to urban areas, blocking of roads and rails. They are known as Chakka Jam. Clear? Blocking of roads and rails, indefinite dharnas. Clear? And pressurizing government officers and media. government officers and media. Clear? That such new form of struggle began to be followed in different parts of India, including the district of Muzaffarnagar, Sisoli village, including the district of Muzaffarnagar in Uttar Pradesh, under the leadership of Mahendra Singh Tikat, who established Bharatiya Kisan Union, BKU, Bharatiya Kisan Union. Clear? Right. In 1986, very important, in 1986, more than 1 lakh peasants, assembled at Sisoli village, and Tikat demanded, same thing was demanded by Son also, and Tikat demanded the Chief Minister of Uttar Pradesh, should visit personally to address peasants' grievances. Clear? Right. The Chief Minister visited the Sisoli village, and accepted the demands, including Devendra Dutt Tripathi, clear? Accepted the demands, clear? Including remunerative prices for agricultural products, comma, reduction in the electricity bill of the peasants, and transportation facilities to supply agricultural products. Clear? Same thing was replicated by his son also recently. Clear? Right. In recent times, next paragraph, in recent times, similar approach was followed by Rakesh Tikat, marked by indefinite dharnas, road blocking, and restricting the supply of essential commodities to urban areas. Clear? Change paragraph. Like these movements evaporated evaporated because they were largely directed against the urban dwellers, whereby large support could not be provided. Support could not be provided to the peasants. Clear? Right. Moreover, the genuine demands of the peasants, are hijacked. The genuine demands of the peasants are hijacked by elite farming communities. That ends up only as the pressure strategy. That ends up only as pressure strategy. Clear? So major phases, clear? So 1947 to 1960, it was largely directed towards land reforms, clear? The first major being Telangana peasant movement, being successful, I'll get to it, clear? Second phase, 60 to 80, marked by class struggle, clear? Largely marked by Naxalbari agitation, Naxal movement. 80s, new farmer movement, clear? New version in form of strikes, dharnas, and even action against urban dwellers by restricting the supply of essential commodities, especially like milk and all, clear? They wanted to restrict the supply so that urban dwellers forcefully should come with them. But this does not happen, and that is why large support base got eroded, and this movement could not lead to desired result. Please. Who are? Farming communities. See, farming communities I'm talking about here is basically representatives of the farmers. Middlemen not. Middlemen is basically a term that has got negative connotation, clear? Normally we don't use the term middlemen, we use the term representatives of the farmers. But it cannot be denied also, clear, that this is also a work of some middlemen also, but largely, clear, middlemen has a negative connotation, clear. Normally, if it is genuine movement, we talk about farming communities in terms of their representatives. Rakesh Tikait is basically a representative of farming communities, clear. So all the farmers cannot come. In fact, you must have seen that he gave the statement also that till the time sowing of seeds is done, the peasants should remain in the villages. When the crops are cut, they should come to Delhi to block the roads and all. That indicate that he was acting as representative of farming communities, not the middlemen, in fact, clear. Is it fine? Clear? So we don't use the term middlemen as such. It has a negative connotation. Is that clear? So these peasant unrest that took place in after India's independence. Different versions, different forms, clear? Apart from this, clear? Apart from this, we'll discuss about other major developments that took place. Again, just understand, in post-independent era, these were domestic developments. Next come some global developments also to be discussed. And in this, we'll discuss about foreign policy as well of India after India's independence in the next session, clear? In this foreign policy, first of all, we'll discuss about the Cold War phenomena, and in this context, we'll discuss the philosophy of non-alignment highlighted by Indian Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru, clear? What were the consequences, how far this policy is relevant now, and how far it has been diluted after Cold War era. Is that clear? We have only 1 hour, clear? So obviously, tomorrow we have a session, I suppose, clear? Tomorrow we have a session. Tomorrow we'll start, yeah, please. Urban dwellers, the people who reside. Urban dwellers basically the term that we use for residents of the cities. Urban dwellers doesn't mean only the native people of urban. Urban dwellers indicate the whole term. That is dwellers, that is who reside. It can be temporary residents also. It can be permanent residents also. Clear? So, like us. Okay, though people who are coming from outside, they're staying in Delhi, even they're staying for weeks, for months also, clear? They will be counted as dwellers. Dweller means someone who is habiting the place, habitation, clear? It's not only the native people. It's clear. Tomorrow we'll start with foreign policy of India in post-independent era. Very important, especially one important issue that is related to nuclear policy. It needs to be done because there are some confusions related to nuclear approach. Clear? Thank you.